Hi, this is Jennie Walker and welcome to Closet Conversations. Today I want to talk to you about some of the qualities that I think it takes to make money reselling. Now, my path to reselling is pretty straightforward and certainly it's unique to me, but my path is certainly given me the qualities that I need to be good at reselling, meaning many years in the retail environment, many years watching what sells, working with customers, many years with estate sales and charity shops and fundraisers via yard sales and consignment shopping, clearance shopping at major department stores or at high-end shops, just loving to shop, knowing brands, knowing fabrics. There's just so many things that are in my background that have helped me be good at reselling. And, you know, the skills that I have are certainly skills that anyone can develop. It's nice to kind of end up in a resale space kind of by happy accident and realize that everything in my life has sort of converged into one place that make it to where all those skills work together to help me be successful as a reseller and as someone who co-owns a luxury consignment shop. And it's going to help you make more money reselling when you have the ability to do certain things, such as identify quality items for resale, be able to identify fine fabrics, to be able to identify, like Italian sizing or French sizing, or understanding what USA means, union tags versus made in Italy versus made in France versus made in China. Where is it? Where is the value? Is the value in the name? Is the value in the fabric? Is the value in the designer? Or is it, the value in where it was constructed? And all of that sort of, jumbles in together to give me a unique set of skills to do what I do. And if I think back on it, as a child, I was a military child. I was the youngest of 5 children. My father was a colonel in the Army, the U.S. Army, and there were many tours of duty, most of which happened before I was born. I have brothers and sisters born in Germany and Italy. Someone's born in Florida, someone's born in Georgia, and I was born in Texas. So we're all kind of all over the place. But what happened is, as a child, I remember, is we were moving constantly, and I would hear about the moves that happened even before I was born. But basically, you move every 2 years on average when you're in the military. And so what happens is that you're constantly having to go through your items and pack them up. And actually, they have professional movers in the military that will do all that for you. But you have to identify what you want to get rid of and what you want to keep. And in my family, we had so many yard sales based on moving. We had so many yard sales not based on moving, just because we had too much stuff, or maybe we moved houses in the same town, so we weren't really moving out of state, but we were moving maybe from military housing into private housing, things like that. So we were constantly moving and purging our goods. And, in that environment, you learn a lot about kind of the attitude of people who are trying to buy at a yard sale or at an estate sale. So as a child, I was very much used to purging, going through what I loved and getting rid of what wasn't useful to me. As I grew older and became a teenager, I became basically in charge of the family yard sales. So I think in the town my mother lived in Columbus, Georgia, you were allowed to have 2 a year. And so we'd have our 2 yard sales a year, and I would be in charge. And, I would do the pricing and get everything prepared with my mother beforehand, and things in boxes, and making sure we had garment racks and tables to put things on and signage all over the city. And I just did that so many times, and to think back on that, what a good time that was. But still, I was always in charge of that. And when it came to pricing, I was in charge. When it came to negotiating, I was in charge, which is kind of funny as I think back, because here I was, this young teenager, holding my own with very experienced antique dealers and resellers. This is back in the 80s. late 70s, early 80s, late 80s, I guess the 80s and up into the 90s before I moved out of Georgia. And I remember kind of going toe to toe with some of these people. And there was like this dealer in town that everyone knew. He was like the guy that everyone knew who went to every yard sale and who had an antique shop. And basically reselling is kind of like the modern day antiquers and the people who had antique stores, because where would they get this stuff? They would go to estate sales and yard sales and wherever they could to source. And so it's really come a long way since those early days that I remember dealing with these people who were buying. And I can remember people trying to get double discounts. You'd have a price and they'd say, well, I'll give you $2 instead of $5. You'd go through all that thing. I remember one time I went through all of this with someone, and at the end, maybe let's say it totaled $76. And at the end they go, okay, I'll give you $50. And I'm like, you're going to double discount me. You can have me discount it on each item, because it was always each item, because there were always a mixture of things that I owned and things my mother owned in every sale. So I was always separating what was owned by me separated from what was owned by my mother. So every time someone wanted to negotiate, I would force them to be like, no, it's per piece. It just depends because, different things. And so I remember that first time, that double discount, that really upset me because I'm like, seriously? And I would be like, no, sorry. And I remember even as a teenager having to be very firm with people. But I also remember how we had always had a lot left over. And I remember I was overpricing even then. I'm still making the same mistake now, as I would overprice, bed sheets or pillows. And, families would come in and they would want to pay you a couple of dollars for every, $2 for a sheet or $2 for a pillow, or, and I've got like pillows at $15 or sheets at, $12. I mean, I always was overpricing. Think back on it. But nonetheless, all of that negotiating and learning what people were willing to buy. And the thing that I always remember was I couldn't understand what was happening, but to me, the antique dealers always had this weird glint in their eyes, right? And I never used to understand what that was until I got into reselling. And what that glint is that they know they're about to buy something really cheap that they're going to make a lot of money on. And so there's like this knowing, I'm not going to say it's smirk because that would be negative, but there's a knowingness to a lot of these seasoned dealers that would come to our sales where it's like they knew something that you didn't, but you weren't quite sure what it was. And I remember like selling not an actual Tiffany, to at least to our knowledge, but we had a Tiffany lamp or a Tiffany style lamp that was in the family I remember my mom sold it to the main dealer in time. I knew his family. And I think we got like, I don't know, $100 for it, $150, something like that. And it was probably priceless, but we sold a lot of things that we didn't know what they were. And it's kind of interesting because I remember later feeling like, we hadn't made a really good negotiation or good deal on things, because you could just tell by how people were acting if they felt like they were getting a good deal or not, or like heavily negotiating, and if you were uninformed and uneducated. And that's the main thing, and that's the thing now, is that people are selling things, or at least offering things for sale, that they don't have any education on. They didn't do their homework. They didn't do the research. They don't really know what the value is. And that's still going on today. I mean, when I source now, I can see something and I'm like, they have no idea what it is. Click, I'm going to buy it. Full price, no questions asked, because I know it's undervalued. And so a lot of years of that combined with many, many years in retail and in packaging things and ringing things up and dealing with how to display things and merchandise things in the stores and steaming and foaming hangers and all that kind of thing since high school. And over time, I was at major department stores like Lord & Taylor and as a part-time employee, because I had a professional job at a college. My first job was at a brokerage firm. It was called the Robinson Humphrey Company. It was later bought out by Shearson Lehman Brothers, I think, bought that brokerage firm, American Express. And so, when you're right out of college and I think I was making $13,000 a year back in the 80s, and needless to say, I had to supplement that job with the retail. And so basically I had to think all day, and I didn't have to think at all when I went into the part-time job, which was just basically, to me, it was just playing with clothes all day long, or all night long rather, because it was part-time, so it was nights and weekends, and of course all of those lovely holidays. But all that experience, wrapping things up, working with customers, seeing what they were willing to pay for things, what sold at full price, what sold it on sale, their expectations, returns. I mean, every single thing I've ever done, relates to today. And over time, I've had different part-time jobs. I even had a part-time job at a consignment shop in Atlanta at one point, where I would just work on weekends, and she would, the woman's passed now, and the store was called Chicky Bee. And I just would go in. I was just fascinated. I just wanted to be in that environment. And here I am, a grown woman with a grown job, like a real job, day job. But I was just so drawn to this consignment environment. And I found this store just from shopping consignment back in the day, back in the early days, back in the 80s, back in the 90s. And it's been around a long time. And so I just always loved it. And later I had a different career. Like I was working with President Carter in Atlanta at the Carter Center, helping to raise money there. Here I am working for a president or former president. And I'm like, dreaming of, my consignment empire, Didn't make any sense, but what can I say? I mean, I remember some of the clothes I wore. It's hilarious. I remember going to that brokerage firm, and this is in the 80s, and I was in love with Princess Diana and all of her hats and all of that. And I remember I had a pure white, winter white wool suit that I wore with a winter white 80s style wide brim hat with a bow on it. And I wore that to work one day. So that is not hilarious, because if you know anything about a brokerage firm, oh my gosh. Needless to say, it was like just insanity that I would have worn that to work. But I did, because my love of clothes goes way back. And yeah, I was miscast in that job. I did learn a lot about the stock market, which I use that knowledge today, so I'm happy about that. But anyway, over time I had different jobs, but I always had this love of retail on the side. So I would spend my time trolling Loehmanns, the old Loehmanns. The first one I ever went to was in Atlanta. So moved to Atlanta from Columbus, Georgia when I got out of college. This is 80s. And so, I found what Loehmanns was, and I was in there. I was fascinated. This is when Loehmanns was basically clothes on rolling racks. And they literally had just rolled it off trucks. And it was just fascinating what was in there, and the beadwork and just things you'd never see. And I would spend a lot of time going to Loehmanns. And all those years I was in Atlanta, about 15 years, I spent many, many, many of those years shopping in Loehmanns. And at one point, I got a part-time job at Loehmanns for the sole purpose of buying clothes and for getting a discount. And it sounds crazy, because I had a full-time job. I don't remember, what was I doing when I was at Loehmanns? I can't actually remember what I was doing, because I moved into charity fundraising work. But I think, I'm like thinking back what job I had. But whatever job I had, I was going into Loehmanns part-time. I could not wait to get in that door every day. I was in the back room where all the designer stuff was. And so that job was, actually, if I'm really honest, I don't know if anybody cares, but I'll be really honest. I remember now why I took that job. I took that job because I was going through a divorce, and my mother had loaned me $2,500 to get a lawyer, and I decided to pay her back by getting a part-time job, and we have the same name, and I would send her my checks, every single check from Loehmanns, to pay her back until she got paid off. And she was in Columbus, I'm in Atlanta, and she would just cash them, and we had a balance going. The minute I got zero and paid her back, I started shopping at Loehmann's. And I was in the back room, and that's where you get to see all the wonderful Italian designers. And, they had beautiful brands even back then. I mean, and every Loehmann's was different around the country. What you had in Atlanta is not what you would have in New York, because of different markets. But even in Atlanta at that time, they had fairly good things in the back room. Donna Karan collection, or I think the gold label at that time. I remember buying a black silk down coat that was full length. I bought a black one and an ivory one that I later took with me when I moved to New York, and I literally wore them to shreds because of the weather up there. But anyway, being in that environment, even part-time, I mean, I would study those clothes like crazy. I was buttoning every button and changing every broken hanger and examining the fabrics and just being fascinated by the styles and, organizing things on the rack. And, that's really how I learned. I learned what quality fabrics were. It's very, very easy over time to be able to identify something that's been well made. Things tend to be better made and more designer when they're coming from Italy or France, for example, versus the United States. These things that are made in China, or even before that, a lot of them were made in Hong Kong, or Taiwan or India. I mean, just the quality isn't there many of the times. And I think it's one of the actual problems with Alexander Wang, who makes everything in China. And I think it's one of the biggest problems with his brand is that obviously he's Chinese, so he's going to support his home country. But I've actually had his products, and they have fallen apart. And I know it's because of my theory. My theory is they were poorly made to begin with. So all style and no quality. And so that's going to affect this in the resale market. So, later in life when I was earning more money and shopping on my own at the Neiman Marcus and at Saks Fifth Avenue. And I mean, I was hunting down designer items, as soon as I could afford them. And certainly a lot of that had to do with my love of clothes, the fact that my mother was so well dressed and she was shopping in those places. So she would take me with her. There was an outlet mall outside of Atlanta we would go to, and we'd hit up the Saks outlet or the Neiman's outlet or whatever outlet was up there. And so I had so much experience buying at a discount or buying at the outlet mall or on the clearance rack of the outlet mall. And so all of those different experiences, buying full price or being in the full price environment of, say, the traditional Saks or Neiman store, being in their outlet store, being in that environment, being on clearance racks, being in Loehmann's where these things end up in that environment, being at estate sales, being at yard sales, being in consignment shops and finding these things for sale. I mean, you add all that up and there's just about no environment I haven't been in. I mean, the one experience I've not had is couture. That's on my list. But I think I've had most every experience. I have had something custom made for me once. And so I've had that experience, but most of these other experiences I've had, and so over time you memorize what brands equal quality, what fabrics turn out to be quality, where things are made, things like that. So those are all things that kind of come together. And then later in life, when I was doing all my charity fundraising work with President Carter, and then later in New York with the Rockefeller family, dealing with the richest people in the world. And ironically, some of the richest people in the world and most philanthropic people in the world, I mean, they're not buying this stuff. They're not dressing. They're busy putting their money elsewhere, so it's not a priority to be having the latest Chanel handbag. As a matter of fact, I would say most of the philanthropists I worked with were very low-key. You wouldn't know by looking at them of the scope of their wealth because they were not wearing it. They were not flaunting it. That wasn't a priority for them. They were busy focusing on doing good things in the world. And so that's really an education. And so who are these people that are buying this stuff anyway, buying it full price inside of a Saks Fifth Avenue or a Neiman Marcus? And a lot of studies point to the fact that it's the middle class. So that's kind of interesting. So anyway, I've had all those different experiences, and they really all come together beautifully. Plus my own shopping. I mean, that's really the big one. My own shopping. I have paid full price in Chanel for things. I have bought full price in boutiques like Christian Dior and department stores like Saks, things like that, and Louis Vuitton. I have had the outlet environment, the outlet malls in New York. I've had the off-price environments like Century 21 and TJ Maxx and Loehmanns, the old Daffies. I've had, the discount environment. I've had the full price environment. I've trolled every, I don't know, Goodwill store, Salvation Army store, small thrift shop I could find, estate sale, yard sale. I mean, I've shopped in town, out of the country, outlet malls in London. I mean, or outside of London. I mean, seriously, there is no shopping that I don't think, like I said, other than couture, like most of the shopping experiences I've had. I've shopped in Paris. I've, shopped in other countries, but all of that sort of comes together beautifully as I'm working in the reselling now and working with luxury consignment, where I am dealing with people who have means and they are bringing me their beautiful things. And so all those years really come into play when I'm having to choose things to sell and select what items I'm willing to consign and select items that I want to buy for resale. And so there's no shortage of that education. And I've spent an embarrassing amount of hours walking around Bergdorf Goodman, walking around Barney's in New York. With most of those long walks were by myself, because I didn't want to be disturbed when I was out shopping. I just wanted to be left alone. I didn't want to have the pace of someone who was with me. So the most serious shopping I ever did was by myself. And when I was with my girlfriends, we were busy saving the world. As we walked around, and the clothes were sort of like backdrop, and we would wander through the department stores. But every time I'd wander and every time I'd go through, I'm memorizing another season of a brand. I'm admiring the stitching or the construction, how it's made. I mean, Alexander McQueen is one of my all-time favorites. Libertine, which most people aren't aware of. I mean, it's more expensive than just about anybody, and it is some of the most fantastic embroidery and beadwork I've ever seen with that brand. And I just remember going through the third floor of Bergdorf, and I'd be like, nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with that. I mean, just in awe of the beauty and the construction and just the architecture of these clothes as art. And so all of that together helps me understand what to look for. And when you're out reselling, looking for items to resell, I've always been focused on the luxury side. But what happens is when you're out reselling and sourcing for your resale business is that you see all this other stuff. And so you have to either make the decision to walk on by or to try to make money selling some of this stuff that is just tremendously undervalued, that's just right in front of you. One of the most important things I think you can do if you're going to be reselling for luxury is you have to spend time with luxury products. And so many people are, confused about something being authentic. Is it fake? Is it real? But I can guarantee you, if you spend enough time handling those products, examining the stitching, learning how these things are presented, you will be able to quickly identify a real one from a fake. And just the other day, someone came into my consignment shop, one of my long-term consigners, and I'd had to return a Chanel bag that turned out to be fake, and which she was really shocked by, but not that shocked because she had not bought it from the Chanel boutique. She had bought it secondhand to begin with and had been told it was real. And I explained to her, here's the 5 things about it that tell me that it isn't. So she brought in another bag, and she says, "Here, I just want you to look at this Louis Vuitton. It's one of the Neverfulls, and I got this from the same person who sold me the Chanel, and I've never been sure if it's real after what you said." So I looked at it, and I'm like, "Got some bad news. It's not real, and here's why. Look at this, look at that, look at that, look at that." I'll even go online and show you one that's for sale, and we can compare it together. Look at here and look at that, and just over time you learn the stitching and the quality of the leather and the quality of the canvas and what the inside lining should look like. And super fakes are pretty, they can be tricky, but it's sort of like you can't. If you think something's off, probably is, so you have to kind of listen to your gut and then really take that deep dive in there. But again, being able to recognize things that are real is one of the qualities that you need in this kind of business is because of having touched it and felt it for so long and owned these products for myself. I did start finding for the first time, I was wandering through a Goodwill store and I found a Max Mara. I'm like, something seems off about this. And then I looked at it further and it had like Chinese characters on the inside tag. And then I looked at it more and I realized it was fake. And my first thought is, really? They're faking a Max Mara? I mean, that's really a kind of a strange brand to be, knocking off, but it was fake. And then I found later a Tom Brown fake. Again, there were a couple of ways to tell. The name was misspelled on the inside tag, and all these little things kind of, it's like, you start seeing the fakes. I saw another fake the other day, and it was some brand that I couldn't believe it would be a fake. And then when you go inside and you see things with Chinese characters, it's sort of like, okay, this Italian brand doesn't do that, It should have Italian sizing. It should have made in Italy in there. It should be in English, if it's in this market. There's a lot of little things like that you learn over time. And so that's really helpful. I mean, I've had to field fake Coach, a lot of fake Coach, fake Burberry, fake Chanel, fake Louis Vuitton, fake Chloe. And, I have to be able to recognize that and be able to understand. And if there's a doubt, we don't take it in. We ask for receipts and things like that. So anyway, those are some of the qualities that I think it takes to be good at reselling. Is you really have to be able to identify quality at a glance, at a feel. It's not always just the brand. It's the quality of the fabrics. It's the condition. Did the boss get to it or not? But then aside from identifying is that the experience reselling and really what is kind of the range you'll be able to get for it. And I've been really reselling since 2003, starting with my own items. And I have over time developed a real feel for kind of a range of what I think I can sell something for. And I've successfully sold Murakami Louis Vuittons that I owned. Got over $1,000 for different bags that I had. And it was great because I made sure that the photos that I included, showed all the elements you need to know to ensure that it's real. I mean, I had receipts and things like that, which always helps. Another aspect to really being good at reselling is the quality of understanding what something is, its historic value. For example, let's say Tom Ford for Yves Saint Laurent, Tom Ford for Gucci. Right now, those pieces are highly sought after. Collectors are eager to get them kind of here before more time has passed, where they can still get them for a song, so to speak. Understanding what brands have value, what collectors are looking for. I've learned a lot about what people are looking for, and that we have different customers. And so some are actual collectors looking for museum quality things from the past, like the 60s space age pieces from Pierre Cardin. That's on my list for someone. Someone else wants a 1980s Chanel large flap bag, different things like that. Some people are interested in particular brands or particular styles. And so sort of have to educate yourself, because you will definitely leave money on the table if you don't know what you have. And like just this week, we sold an Oscar de la Renta lace. And it felt like, it was a little bit scratchy. It felt like a polyester blend lace. It didn't, or like a cotton blend lace. It didn't feel like it's 100% cotton, and it wasn't like Chantilly, but it was this beautiful lace blouse. It almost had a 70s style to it, in terms of the tiny little ruffles at the neck, fullish sleeves, closed at the wrists, and just kind of, like double pleats down the front. Your classic cream ivory lace blouse. And it was vintage. And someone else might have priced it at $50 and called it a day. But I mean, I took one look at this thing and I was just like, this is incredible. It's incredible. Too bad it's not my size. But first of all, it's Oscar de la Renta. Had a Union, made in USA, I think Union tag in it. Pristine condition. The person who brought it in kept their things absolutely immaculate. As wearable today as when it was made. And if you were to go out right now, look for lace blouse like that, Oscar de la Renta or any other luxury brand, it'd be like a couple $1,000s. So I ended up pricing it at $275. And we just sold it on eBay. Someone made us an offer for $250 and we took it. And that's after I turned down an offer for $175. And this is really interesting because I'm like, we've only had this thing like a week online. It is gorgeous. We haven't even had our fall, showcase or anything in our store yet. And this is one piece we like put it on the mannequin. I think is all we had done. And then we had taken it down. But it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous piece, and I wasn't going to give it away. And even at $250, what a bargain! But if you try to get too much more than that in a consignment environment, it's just, our contracts don't allow enough time for that. So, if I tried to get like $500 for it, I think that would have been way, way too hard. Given the amount of time we have to sell it. If we owned it, that'd be different. I would put $500 on it in a minute and just wait it around. But it was gorgeous and we sold it for that. But the key is to understand why, not it would cost that, but why would it be worth $250 to somebody? And first of all, it's the condition, it's the style, it's the fact that it's lace, it's the fact that it's designer, the fact that it's vintage, the fact that it's pristine. And, all those things factor in to the fact that of what we priced it and then what we ultimately sold it for. And actually, this one consignor who brought us all these things, I've sold so many of her blouses right away, full price. I think we got over $200 for a Ralph Lauren silk kind of sheer blouse with little floral embroidery on it with pearl, had French cuffs with these like pearlized buttons on it. That was $200 something. Someone happily paid me full price for that. We sold another, what was it? It was a Halston. This is interesting. It was a Halston black and white polyester blouse with H's all over it. Vintage, probably 80s. And we got over $100 for that one. It was I think it was like 140 or something like that. I just thought it was amazing. And, when I see things and I'm thinking of pricing them and understanding like I ask myself, what's the most I could possibly get and still sell it? Because if I were to compare that to something on eBay and, you can get that same blouse for probably $6.95 if you've got some auction on eBay that no one sold, because they'll probably be like, oh, it's this old polyester blouse or it's this old thing. But you know what? It's not that. And that's where my love of clothes sort of kicks in, and I sit back and I look at things like, this is a work of art. This is amazing. This is incredible. And I'm going to have to find a price that reflects that, but is still sellable. So that's just experience and just time around things that would help me understand that that's possible for my store. It's possible for our customers and possible, for the online audience. Other things to consider when you are working with reselling is something that I had someone call perceived value in the context of pricing an item. And I definitely think when you have the environment of a luxury consignment shop, that you have an opportunity to charge a whole lot more for something in that environment than you could elsewhere. I mean, you've got a beautiful environment with where it smells good and things are on beautiful hangers and there's beautiful fixtures and there's beautiful artwork. And I think those are really the things that elevate any brand and any store environment. And so when you take something out of that environment, that's I think a lot of times how things lose their value. At least the perceived value. I mean, I can buy the same thing in a Crossroads Trading or a Buffalo Exchange or a Goodwill or a Salvation Army or an outlet mall or the clearance rack of a department store, a yard sale, a consignment shop, an estate sale, a pawn shop, you name it. And the same item in all those different environments, you're going to have a perception of how much you'd be willing to pay for it. And that definitely is in our favor, having a physical brick and mortar store in terms of selling our things at full price or at the starting price, because they're in this beautiful environment. And now we're trying to extend that environment into our eBay store. We have recently hired a photographer that's going to do a very special project for us, and they're going to we're going to reorganize and redo all of our photos now to that standard white background. So we bought a light box and one of those giant screens that goes to the floor so you can have your clothes, and that's going to create a different environment for our items, and we're going to see how that works for us online to see if that's a better alternative than what we've been doing, which is showing the item within the environment of our store. I think the online selling environment is really interesting because there's so much competition now when having things online, and some people have done something very simple and effective. I mean, if you go to thredup.com and look at what they've done, they just have basically a simple dress form that they put things on. They use a regular size dress form and a plus size dress form. It's very simple. It's interesting because it's simple and it doesn't have a very luxurious feel about it, but it gets the job done. You get to see what you're looking at, you can evaluate it, and make a decision. You go to some place like The Real, and they don't use forms like that. They use actual mannequins. And I can tell you from working with mannequins, they're spending a lot more time getting those clothing photographed by doing it that way. Because getting clothes on and off a professional mannequin is no joke. If you look at The Real, again, and you look at First Dibs, these are both places where they've put things on mannequins, full mannequins, or mannequins, I think, without heads. But look at something like Luxury Garage Sale. They actually have fantastic pictures, by the way. You really see how everything is elevated by the fact that they have taken these images actually on a mannequin against the white background. Compare that to thredUP. Compare that to, say, even a Hysteria Collective, where they whitewash the first picture of everything, and some things are on mannequins, some are laying on the floor or laying on a table or whatever, and you can tell the difference. And so part of that online presentation and that environment in which you're seeing it is going to make a difference in what you're willing to pay. So it's important to keep that in mind. And when you're outsourcing, what's really wonderful is when you can go to all these different places there are to source online and in person or in brick and mortar stores, and be able to look through and spot quality items that you know without looking up, or if you take the time to look them up on your phone, that you can make money on. So that's just a little bit about my stream of consciousness diatribe here about a little background on qualities for reselling. Now, I do want to say, now that I want to wrap this up, but I got my first email from someone who was listening to my last podcast, and they emailed me today and asked me some questions and some advice about something that they were looking for. And at first I saw the email. It was so quick. I didn't even see the line where they said they'd seen my podcast. I just asked the question, and then I responded really quickly because I was in a hurry today. And then I went back and I went, wait a minute. They just told me they listened to my podcast last night and that they liked it. So I was like, that was such a compliment. And so I won't say who it is, but I really, really appreciated that person took the time. They went to the Walker Viden website and joined our email list and sent me an email off the site, and I responded right away. So I just thought that was just wonderful. So if any of you are listening and you've got any questions for me, or if you're looking for advice on anything, or just, need some direction, feel free to email me. I'll definitely get back to you. It's all free advice, so don't worry about that. I'd love to share my knowledge or what I know, or help point someone in the right direction. You can just go to walkerviden.com, WALKERV like victory, IDEN.com. And you can email us there, join the email list, read more about us. Otherwise, I'm on all social media through Walker Viden Luxury Consignment and my resale store, Jenniegirl's Closet. So thank you for listening. I hope that you enjoy this. If you are enjoying this, please give it a 5-star rating and a review. That really helps make sure that this podcast is as high as possible in search results. And now that we are trending in terms of our ranking with 5 stars, I just want to keep building on that and getting some feedback so that I will continue to know that people are appreciating it, and it's worth everyone's time and everyone who's involved. So until next time, it's Jennie Walker with Jenniegirl's Closet and Closet Conversations. Thank you.